Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tastemakers. Of course, this is the podcast where we check out what's going on in the world of TV and film, let you know what's worth checking out yourself, and talking about all the happenings, and tasting them, and making your tastes. That's the Tastemakers. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong. With me, as always, it's my co-host, Grace Leeder. How are you doing, Grace?
I'm doing well. I'm it's the end of the year, so lots of top 10 lists, including one that we dropped on We Know Scripted TV. And I feel like it's the time of year where I'm like, oh, I missed that one, but less so this year because we talk about all the TV there.
We do. We talk about all the TV. We talk about movies too. It's in there.
Mm-hmm.
And last week we talked a tiny bit about video games. A little bit.
A little bit.
All right. Well, this week, of course, there's not, I think, a ton of new things to talk about or new things coming up or really news in general. I feel like it's a somewhat slow week. However, there was an onslaught of season 2 renewals that I want to talk about. We have the battle of the animated family movies, Sonic versus Mufasa, that happened this week. And just a couple of new shows and some things I want to catch up on as well from the last few weeks. And then, of course, upcoming, we got the big Squid Game coming soon, Grace. So we'll talk about that as well.
I'm very excited for Squid Game, but yeah, I feel like it has been a little bit of a light release window. It makes sense, and most people aren't going to drop their content right before the holidays, so a little bit less of new things to check out. But it's a very interesting week for me because we dropped the top 10 list there, and so I feel like an extra little bit of data dump in terms of what people were watching, and things that I feel like would have got more votes if they came out earlier in the year, but because they came out so late, they did not make the list. Squid Game being the best example of that. I think people would have voted for it if it came out not after the polls closed, Darren.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of these season 2 renewals because I think it's a good vehicle to talk about some of these shows, as many of them have come to a close recently. Of course, we talked. We did a podcast, and we'll do one more podcast on Dune Prophecy, which has been renewed for season 2 officially. A 6-episode season for season 1. Don't know how many episodes they've ordered for season 2. Don't know if that's in the announcement, but Dune Prophecy getting a second season. I have caught up and finished Dune Prophecy. Mm-hmm. The fact that it's getting a season 2, I'm like, all right, I'm not that excited.
Yeah, interesting. I do feel like I would have been more annoyed had it not gotten to season 2 because of the way season 1
it very clearly meant to I don't know why I thought this was going to be a somewhat self-contained thing. It is very much not.
Yeah, I thought so too. And actually, part of my critique of the show midway through, which I actually do like the season as a whole, and we're going to talk about it. There'll be a separate pod that you can listen to. If you're listening to this, should be out around the same time. But for my money, I also thought this was a mini series. I think because of the level of changes that went into the process of who was going to do it, who was in it, when it came out, et cetera, that this felt like they were just gonna trying to get it done and then that would be it. But no, they're gonna continue on in a way that actually excites me because I think that based on where they leave things off, I'm kind of seeing what they potentially want the show to be is potentially more exciting to me than what we mostly got in season 1. So I'm okay with the renewal. Actually, I like the show. I just think now in retrospect, this season was an epilogue to whatever else they want to do.
Prelude, perhaps.
A prelude, which in some ways is kind of annoying when you're watching it at the time. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. It was not. It did not feel like a complete season of television to me. We'll talk about it more, of course, on the dedicated review. But At this point for me, like, if you like Dune, if you like sci-fi, yeah, check it out. But like, it's not something I would recommend you commit to yet, because I just think there are too many. Like, it's just not even, I think, good enough to watch yet. There's still so much left on the table. I think that 6 episodes was a mistake. I can see the world where this is a good, really good show. But it needed more space to breathe with the amount of things it was trying to do, I think, and do properly. And so, yeah, there's maybe a situation where a season 2, it's actually able to properly, manage what it was trying to do. But until then, I can't stamp an approval recommend on it for myself.
I actually would tell people to watch it. I think it actually is pretty good. But if you're listening to this and then you're going to go watch it, you now have all of the expectations that I did not have going into it, which is that what I basically think this is, Darren. Actually, it's kind of unsurprising that I think that these two shows come from the same network, which I actually do feel like it has a little bit of like first half of season 1 of House of the Dragon vibes. In which case, like, imagine that they cut that season, because that first season was 10 episodes. Imagine that they cut basically when they do the actor swap. Imagine that was the end of the season. I feel like that would have felt pretty unsatisfying. But if you take all of that season as base, yeah, like I was saying, like a prelude, or it's basically like a setup, like it feels like, okay, now basically the last scene of that first season is like, oh, I see now what we want to do with the show, in a way that I think, like, now that it got renewed, and if you're listening to this, you now know what the show, that's I think what they're trying to do. I think, like, you can watch it and not be frustrated in the same way that maybe we were frustrated. I don't know if you agree with that, Taran. And I have one other point that I want to talk through with you about Dune Prophecy before we move on.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I think for me, it's more so like if they tried to cram the entirety of House of the Dragon season 1 into a single season, uh, including the fact, but like condensing it all into, instead of like being faithful to the amount of time that actually passed, they just actually tried to cram all the events into
Right.
one period of time and cut it down to 6 episodes. And that to me was Dune season 1, and that's partially why I'm just like, oh, just too much for what you're trying to do.
I feel that. I do think that there is a big difference between, it's funny because one of those things, one of those shows, they were coming to do it on HBO, which is House of the Dragon, after like a catastrophic failure to land the plane on the original show. So it had like the worst, most garbage reputation. And then the other one, which is Dune, which just has like potentially like Oscar winning, momentum happening with like Dune Part 2. I don't think it'll win the Oscar, but like it certainly has a chance. Like, it has so much more going for it at the moment. And yet I feel like the effort to put this thing on television, were like, you'd almost expect them to have the opposite strategies of them being so invested in House of the Dragon being a success, in a way that I think you can really feel, in terms of it being like, this is a kind of an interesting television year, in that I think it was a very strong year of television. And yet I think there was only like one 5-star, no doubt about it, like absolute mega hit, which is Shogun.
Mm.
Whereas everything else was like really, really good television. But House of the Dragon, I feel like, got like special treatment from HBO that I don't think Dune got. And I mean that all the way back from like clearly the formation of this idea and how they're going to tell this story, and what they're going to do with it, in a way that I think you can kind of feel in the end product that we got. My other question to you, Taran, is I feel like, as much as I say, like, I really liked the show, the fact that I turned on the episode and checked the runtime and it was an hour 20, and I went like, oh God, I feel like is maybe a sign that I didn't even like it as much as I think I liked it, just in terms of like, but is there any show that you're turning on the runtime for and you see that it's like an hour 10 plus, and you're not being like, I feel awful saying this because I'm someone who loves television, Taran. But every time I see a tremendously long runtime, I'm like, okay, all right, I guess I'll do that. Even if it's the best episode of television I ever watch, I still probably still want it to be, even if, it's the sales trick of calling it like 59 minutes,
I mean, I like House of the Dragon. I think is season
Yeah.
1. I was like pumped anytime that it was a longer episode. Something like
Right.
The Last of Us, when there was a longer
That's true.
episode. I was like, yes, like when it's a good show and it justifies its length, its runtime, I'm pumped about it. Dune was not that show for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I've been trying to finish Nobody Wants This as well. And I feel tricked by that show because the first few episodes are like 22 minutes and then slowly it starts to get the creep of like, oh, 27, oh, 29. I'm like, no, you got to be a 20-minute sitcom, but that's okay.
That's a show I didn't even notice the length creeping up on me when I was watching it.
Fair enough.
All right. Anything else on Dune?
No, we're going to cover it more fully. So there's a full podcast for people who want Dune takes.
Okay. Well, another show, Dandadan or Dandadan, not sure which one. The anime has also been renewed for season 2. Just finished its first season. I've talked about it a couple times. I mentioned it when I first stumbled upon it, and then more recently, I mentioned it again. That it is just crushing. I've seen a lot of people who are in the anime sort of world talk about it as like the best anime of the year. A lot of people are really liking it. It's been a smash hit. There's sort of like an interesting story behind the creator of the show as well. Definitely something I think worth checking out, though, with the warning that it is anime. And from what I've been able to gather, something about anime is that they often try to be very like shocking or like in your face as early as possible to grab attention. And this show has one of those kinds of moments that has turned some people off for the first episode of it. But it is actually a very good show, I think. Renewed for a season 2. I will also warn people about this show, though. Not a complete story in season 1 whatsoever at all. In fact, I don't think this is a spoiler to say. The finale is like half of a 2-parter episode, basically. Like they just cut straight in half. Like I saw some people saying that it's likely this was supposed to be like a 24 episode season that was just cut in half by Netflix because it really just does not make any sense as an actual finale. So don't go in expecting like a full arc in a season. That is not happening, but it is a very good show.
Interesting. There's another show that did that where they like not this quite the same that kind of Severance. Severance was supposed to be a 10 episode season 1, and then they were like, actually, I think 9 is the better finale, and they cut off the episode, which I think is so interesting. Also, House of the Dragon, not I think only because of the writer's strike, also felt like it was like cut short. I wonder if that's like there's something to that trend. Obviously these are very different shows. I don't know why in my head I sometimes feel like every anime is going to be like a million episodes, 12 episodes in the season 1. That's pretty
12 episodes.
reasonable.
Very, very quick watch. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm intrigued by it. Also has a manga like series attached to it that's been running since 2021, right? So
very popular. Yeah.
Interesting.
And
go
banger
ahead.
of a theme song.
Okay.
I've been hearing it out in the wild, like just on like I mean, Spotify might make sense that they're all of a sudden playing it because I'm watching the show. They might somehow know, but I hear it at the climbing gym. I heard the Dandadan song, and let me tell you, this thing has been stuck in my head for like weeks. I am not even kidding. It's been on a constant loop. Dun, 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 dun. I cannot get it out of my head. It's a good song, but it's starting to drive me a little bit out of my head. So yeah.
All right. I'm not typically an anime fan. I dabble occasionally in animated television, but not anime. But I might need to, on your recommendation, might need to check.
I don't know if it's like the show for non-anime watchers, but I do think it is probably the best anime of the year. So
okay. So then let me ask. I like to throw the audience a question sometimes, which is like, if I'm not an anime person, the most like anime I've ever done is not anime. It's like I've watched the live action versions of anime shows. So I liked One Piece, and I actually didn't mind the Avatar: Last Airbender Netflix live action show as well. I was really tempted by One Piece, except everyone's like, oh, there's so many episodes, and that to me is a little intimidating, but maybe not. So if people have recommendations for which anime I should watch first,
One Piece,
absolutely let me know.
I mean, I think we talked about this before, but like the remake that they're gonna do soon, I think might be worth checking out because that will cut out the filler, I imagine. And then I think we might have mentioned this early on in the Tastemaker run, but Frieren, which is I think fairly
Oh, yeah.
well considered to be one of the best animes of the anime shows of the previous year, might be a little more like newbie friendly to anime. It's a little more like reserved,
Mm,
and it's like a slower pace, which might not be like the most engaging in the world at times, but
right.
I think is a lot more considered in terms of how it approaches its storytelling. So
Okay.
maybe that one. All right, Black Doves also renewed for season 2.
Black Doves. I'm very excited by this one. I really liked Black Doves. I finished watching it. It's a quick little jaunt, 6 episodes, so I think it's a good one. My dad last night, I'm at my parents' place, and my dad was scrolling through Netflix, and I had this debate about whether to tell him to watch Black Doves or to watch Carry On. And I ultimately told him to watch Carry On only because I knew it
Mm,
was like a shorter commitment, but
yeah,
I could have gone either way. Very excited for this renewal. I think that this could be a little bit of a surprise new Netflix show that they have a little bit of a hit on their hand. I would really love if this was like came out every Christmas. Whether or not they could keep that schedule would be TBD. But I quite enjoy if they're only doing 6 episodes. You think that they could? So I would quite
you'd
enjoy
think.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Black Doves for me, I still haven't finished it yet. But I think the key to enjoying Black Doves is that I came into it assuming it was going to be like the Agency or the Jackal, like these very serious approached kind of spy, assassin, whatever shows. I kind of thought it was going to be another kind of serious show. It's not a serious show.
No.
It deals with very serious topics, and there's lots of killing and death and all of that. But it's actually more of like a like let's just kind of be goofy and have fun and also throw in some jokes here and there. It's kind of a silly show, while still being very violent and such. So I think if you go in with those, like once I sort of acclimated to that, I came around and I am enjoying it. It's not like knocking it out of the park for me, but it's definitely like a fun thing to throw on. And I'm happy that it's getting a season 2.
Yeah, I feel like the driving, like I don't often, I feel like it has a Netflix vibe, and that sounds silly because it is a Netflix show. But compared to like Slow Horses, which I feel like has like
Mm.
more of a like gritty, like political intrigue thing, so much of the character's motivation in Black Doves is actually wound up in romance and love for somebody, or that sort of thing, which I feel like gives it that like not that it's not, but it is. It's like there are these like silly people, but then those people are like literally, serial killers or hitmen or
Yeah,
whatever.
like in the
But
middle of like an operation where people are living and dying, like it's like, oh, I'm getting a call from my ex right
right,
now. Like, oh
right,
man, like what do I do?
right.
Like that's the kind of thing you're dealing with, but it presents it more serious than you think it would be. But it kind of it works. It just works.
Yeah, you'll watch it. People will watch it. It's good. I enjoy it. I highly recommend it. And I think you can like sort of breeze through it in a sense that it is only those 6
Mhm.
episodes. So yeah.
Creature Commandos also renewed for season 2. I like throughout the
Mm.
week, I was just like writing show renewed for season 2, show renewed for season 2. Another one renewed for season 2. People are still enjoying Creature Commandos. It is, as I said, not likely for me based on the episodes that I watched. I think they are about 4 or so episodes in now. And yeah, 4 episodes in, and people are still really liking the show. It's been renewed for season 2. So if you are into this style of cartoon, uh, um, you know, show, I think you're really gonna like Creature Commandos, and you're gonna be able to enjoy more of it as it gets to season 2.
So the other thing that happened, not I think did it happen between these weeks was the Superman trailer dropped. Is that maybe
Oh
and now
yes.
that one of the most watched trailers of all time already with Superman? I think it looks quite good. Um, D Are you sensing so I'm trying to be on social media slightly less than I am. I feel like, specifically Twitter. I find that, I'm trying to be far less on Twitter than I was before, but still every once in a while my phone's like, "Hey, there's a thing on Twitter you should see." And my brain, can't follow my own rules that I set, and I click on it and I look at it. And I saw already this week, I felt like there's a little bit of a, like, pro Zack Snyder, anti James Gunn thing happening out in the world, which is like from a segment of the population that maybe it only lives on Twitter. But I was wondering whether or not like this show, have you seen any? I've also been kind of seeing like people have not been super on the show, and then when I saw that it was renewed, it was like, oh, that's interesting. I've not checked out any of Creature Commandos, and I don't really think I will. We'll talk about something that I did check out a little later, that again in the animated world, that I was like, yeah, I see the appeal, but maybe not totally for me. But I feel like just on the verge of the James Gunn universe like arriving. I'm already feeling this very annoying discourse about the DC universe stuff that I feel like just feels so bad for, it coming. I'm just kind of hoping Superman's really good. That I would actually not mind a very good Superman movie, Taran.
That's interesting. I haven't seen any of that. I mean, from basically every angle I've looked, people have seemed to like Creature Commandos. It's well rated on the various sites. IMDb has a good rating for it. Like,
I'm mostly seeing like, oh yeah, okay. Like I'm not seeing like bad. I'm just seeing like, yeah, I'm not, not interested. Maybe more so for Creature Commandos, but
also Zack Snyder feels like
I
guys,
know.
it's been a while. Like,
I know. That's what I'm saying.
And it never worked. Like, listen, I'm
worked.
not anti Zack Snyder. Like, I think he's made some fun stuff. But like, not in the DC universe.
Yeah. Okay, this is
I watched the Snyder cut. It was just longer. It was just longer.
Yeah, Creature Commandos has a 95% critic score and then a lower Rotten, which is 80. It's still very good, but that kind of tracks for me with, I feel like, where it's like it's not for everybody, but the people who are liking it are quite liking it. That feels like that tracks for me. So I guess no surprise that it got renewed.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of show where it would probably be even more highly rated if it was only appealing to its demographic. I think the fact that it appealed to somebody like me who doesn't usually watch that kind of thing, because I was like, oh, it's the new thing in the DC universe, let me check it out. There's like more people that were like, oh, this isn't really for me. Whereas if it was like, hey, this is like the latest cartoon show, like I'd be like, oh, we love these cartoon shows. Then maybe it would be faring better. But that's Creature Commandos. As I mentioned, Sonic versus Mufasa has been deep in the headlines for the box office numbers. I've seen like a variety of different ways that people have written headlines about how Sonic has outpaced Mufasa or trampled Mufasa or
collected all the rings or something, something like that.
That Sonic has outperformed Mufasa in the box office and seems to have been better received as well. There's something a little bit interesting there about like the animation styles that they've chosen to go with. Sonic, of course, a huge success story after its absolute disaster of a trailer for the first one years ago, where they showed this hideous looking Sonic, were reamed out by the internet and changed the look, ended up creating a hit. Second movie was great. I've heard the third movie is even better. It's doing very well. Had a bit of a drop on Sunday, but still doing better than Mufasa, who has had some criticism from the original Lion King remake, where it was like, this is too realistic, which was very much a stylistic choice, not only in this sense that they went with CGI, but even just in the way that they shot it, in the way that they animated facial expressions in the original Lion King remake.
But that movie made $1 billion.
It made $1 billion. And so they were like, well, let's try it again. And I will say, from what I think, for Mufasa, they actually did cartoon it up a bit compared to the original Lion King. The facial expressions are more dynamic. It is more cartoony, even though it is still CGI. However, it's just not enough, and it's not competing with Sonic so far. It's not landing well with audiences, and it's not making as much money as you would hope, considering the first one. So that is kind of the current state of the box office.
Yeah, I mean, Mufasa probably does end up like just like unfortunately by coincidence running up against Sonic, which is, I think
who would have guessed Sonic would perform better than a Lion King movie?
I know, and it's funny Sonic too because 3. Like I know, because like Sonic games aren't even like things I played as kid. Really, like they're a little bit like I was a little bit too young for Sonic video games, kind of. And just like it doesn't feel like that he was like the like video game star when I was a kid, but suddenly has just
He
like
was like the edgy alternative
yeah,
to Mario back in the day.
yeah, and then just has like suddenly reinvented himself as basically just like a movie star, because it doesn't feel like they're like making a ton of like new Sonic games. Um, I saw Mufasa, and I would have gone to either one, and I just went to the one that was playing sooner than the other one. That's literally
Mhm.
all that happened. Mufasa started at 9:30 and Sonic started at 9:40, so I went to go watch Mufasa because I was able to
10
watch one.
minutes.
Yeah, but it started earlier and then would finish earlier. So
Yeah.
that's it. That's all it took. I literally did not care which one I went to go see. I just figured I'd go see one. I probably will go see Sonic at some
Mufasa is
point.
10 minutes longer than Sonic.
That's hilarious. So that's probably exactly actually why they put it that way. But I just literally in my head was like, okay, I'll go watch it. I didn't think it was bad. I gave it like 2.5 out of 5 stars. Like it's like a totally like fine
Mm,
movie. The music is pretty unmemorable. There's like kind of one good song. This is Lin-Manuel Miranda did all the songs for Mufasa, and it's Barry Jenkins. Like this is a fine movie. This is not like atrociously bad.
mhm,
I think if you like don't jive with the style of of like it's funny that it's like considered like kind of like a live action movie, because it's like it's all animated. The story is like perfectly fine, and there's literally a thing that happens in it that I was like kind of annoyed that I like didn't catch until, and then like the movie's just, like literally trying to hit you over the head with like the point of the thing. So it's perfectly fine. The other thing about this is like with that, like it made $35 million, I think, domestically. Mufasa, like they probably both should do fine internationally. This is also like this weekend kind of doesn't really matter
mhm.
in the sense of like looking at how much money it made, because what really matters is basically getting this like 10-day window,
Yeah.
because you're basically getting like last Thursday all the way, you basically the holidays is because kids are off school, every day is a weekend day at the movie theater, of like you can take your kids to go see a movie any day of the week rather than just Saturday Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see. I think for me mostly, as, as long as they both like, as long as Mufasa does like fine, like I don't think that they were thinking that this would make literally $1 billion, and maybe they are a little bit hurt by Sonic, but I don't think Sonic's like gonna like completely stop it from making basically its money back, like and not even make its money back. I think this movie is going to do very well for Disney, and their big play is also like put stuff on in theaters and then put it on the streaming platforms, and people and kids watch it. So
Mhm.
I don't know. We'll see. I don't have a lot of like hot takes about Mufasa and Sonic, other than it's like kind of interesting that they both went head to head this past weekend, but and should probably continue to do well through into the doldrums of January movie theater
Mhm.
going.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the new shows, or unless any other news that we want to bring up.
No, I don't think so. I think you hit all the ones that I had seen as well. So, well, there
Okay.
is
Well,
okay. Well, there is one big news story. I did forget this.
yes.
That I don't think either of us are like particularly like looking through the scouring what's happening here. Other than that, it is very interesting that there is this "It Ends With Us" lawsuit that Blake Lively has put. And I do think when we talked about it in the summer, there was sort of this idea that it did seem like there was conflict between Blake Lively and the director. They were not doing any press together. They were never seen together. They did not seem to be very complimentary of one another. Obviously, the director and star, not star of the film. Well, he is in the film, but I would not say he's the star of the film. I would say Blake Lively is the star of the film. There was this thing about that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds started to like take over production of the set, which has come out in the response to a lawsuit that's been made. But it does look like, based on some of the text messages and emails that have been leaked, is that there was like an actual legitimate campaign to try and slander Blake Lively as the reason why this thing, why it ends with us controversy
Yeah.
was happening. Justin Baldoni has come out and basically like defends what they're saying, and that basically it was not an illegitimate slander campaign. It was basically like, no, they were frustrating to work with on set, and so that's why we were working the way that we were doing. Like we had to basically act in that way. All in all, maybe not great at all for anybody in this situation. But certainly, I will say I take that back in the sense that like Blake Lively has claimed that she was sexually harassed on set, which if that's true, that obviously is bad, and Justin Baldoni probably should just been removed from the whole process of this
This is a
movie. So
wild story.
it
So,
is pretty wild.
yeah, like, because I remember us talking, and it might have been on podcast, it might have been off podcast because we were like, oh, what's happening? I'm pretty sure we talked about it on podcast about like, there's something going on with this movie. There's some sort of controversy. But every time I tried to look it up, it was just very confusing. It was just a lot of people being like, yeah, this person seems bad. And I didn't understand what the controversy was, and I don't think I ever really got like a clear picture. And then, come to find out, there was an orchestrated attempt to bury somebody, Blake Lively, by a PR company. I believe, from what I read, and this is not confirmed for me, but I believe the same company that
Yeah.
Johnny Depp used.
Yeah, Johnny Depp and Drake have both used the same PR company. Yeah.
And there were text messages from people who work there between each other talking about how they were going to destroy Blake Lively and how easy it was, and how they were like, man, it's almost too easy. The internet just loves hating women, I guess. I don't even agree with half the things they're saying, but man, we're doing a good job. And on top of that, I think now allegations of, yes, on set, there was sexual harassment, and there were like rules that needed to be implemented about like boundaries set for Blake Lively based on the actions of Justin Balls or whatever,
Baldoni. Yep.
Baldoni,
Mhm.
and so it's this whole big thing, and I think, you know, barring like the details of this particular instance are, their own thing. But I think the thing that is particularly worth taking away from this is just how easily I think the online discourse can be and is manipulated intentionally to pull favor or disfavor in any particular direction. And you can just genuinely just pay money and create narratives and shift perspectives and get like the general consensus on your side or against another person. And it worked. Like, I saw a lot of people talking about like, man, I got tricked by this. Like, I thought Blake Lively was just kind of like a bad person. And more so than that, I also saw like, yeah, but it's at least a little bit right? Like, it still worked. Like, even after you find out that you got intentionally manipulated, you're like, yeah, but she's still probably a little bit bad, right? Like, I couldn't have believed it for no reason. And I don't know, maybe she is, but like, surely you have to look inward and go, wait a minute, I've been manipulated. It's a wild story. And I would love for more to come out about like the methods that were used and so on and so forth. But like, yeah, wild stuff.
Yeah, it's been part of, I think, not specifically this, but me like so noticing recently, and especially like with Elon buying Twitter, just how much social media engagement is fueled and thrives on like anger and frustration, and in a way that I just really don't like. I'd often like see something and my, on a TikTok or Instagram, whatever, my instinct was like start to read the replies, or even just see something on Twitter and read the replies, and all the ones that are just being like so angry, and then I would get angry at the responses and then be like, oh no, but that's the point. Like that's what social media is designed to do. I saw a thing the other day, Taran, that was like somebody was doing, they must have been like a college student, and they were like, this is how I basically find out the answers to my thing, which is they pushed the thing that was like the example is something like, I know that like it has been proven that this number is not a prime number or something, and then somebody like responded to me like, you idiot, like this is how it proves the opposite of what you're saying, and they're like, thank you. And the person basically was able to like and I just feel like if that doesn't tell me enough about social media that I already, which is that like it's fueled on like the more angry you are, and the more likely you are to respond to something, which feels like just a bad headspace for all the internet to be in. Like I have seen interviews that are not from this press tour of Blake Lively. There's one where it does seem like she's being pretty shitty to the interviewer. I can't remember specifically if I can pull up the name of the movie that she was doing press for. It does feel like it was shitty, but then that got circulated during this press tour, which makes me think like, well, there's a million reasons why she could have been shitty to that individual interviewer on that day that are more than just she's a shitty person. It could be that she's had interviews with that interviewer before. She could have been having a bad day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that led her to have like a bad moment in a clip that then is then able to use in another press tour for another thing where she's literally being slandered for her behavior. And it all just seems not great and not fun. And I don't want to be on social media, but this is pretty interesting.
I come from the world of reality television, and
Right.
I know how easy it is to take footage and use it to manipulate the people you're showing it to into thinking a certain way. And like, yeah, like who has I haven't seen the clip, but like who hasn't had a shitty moment in their lives? Like of just like maybe you were just a little bit too rude in that moment. And like, you know, and again, I haven't seen that. Maybe it was much worse than that.
And
but
the
like,
clip, the responses too, is like the lady, she is trying to talk about the costuming, but it is in a way where like Blake Lively immediately responds as kind of like, oh, I don't think you would have asked the men in this movie that question, which like might have been a rude way to respond and might not have been the intention of the interviewer, but also might still be true. And I think multiple things can be true with this thing too, is like the way we,
so she dared question the patriarchy as well. So that's obviously going to add to the perspective there.
Right. So the whole thing is just like kind of just a mess and makes me, I don't want to be involved in any of this stuff, but it is news and it is interesting in terms of like the way that the media portrays what's happening, the stories that are being told.
And in terms of this particular story as well, it's also the movie is about domestic violence.
Yes. So the other points I was going to make is that I do feel like there was also a lot of controversy about this film, about the way that it sort of was not explicitly saying what the movie's about, and it sounded like a love story in the way that like then when people watched the movie, they were quite like, feeling like they would have loved like a content warning in terms of going in expecting like a rom-com and then being like, oh no, it's actually about how that guy is abusing and the abusive relationship this person is in, which on one hand I see the need for, and also on the other hand, like that could be part of the point of the film is that you're not expecting to go. Like I haven't actually watched It Ends With Us, so it's all extremely complicated. But there was this extra layer of this movie, there being a lot of controversy about the movie being marketed incorrectly in a way that I think has also fueled confusion about, especially when you're like talking about not that to some about like literally sexual harassment on set, and then literally a movie about an abusive relationship that I think like blurred the lines in a way that purposely made this a confusing story to try and decipher. So
yeah. All right, let's talk about some of the new things that aired this week. Three shows basically were I was going to try to keep track of: Laid, The Dragon Prince, and Count of Monte Cristo. Or sorry, that wasn't a show. That was last week. The movie Count of Monte Cristo was theoretically dropped, but it's a French movie. Apparently, the movie's good. I mean, it's well rated. If you want to watch the French Count of Monte Cristo.
I've heard this. I've heard people like it, so I will be trying to check it out. I just the holiday season, it's tough for me to catch as many movies, especially ones that don't have as wide of release. Like literally, the only movie I could go see in the town that I'm in right now that I've not seen is, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. So, yeah,
it's wild to me that there's literally two versions of this exact story coming out at the exact same time. So it's like especially difficult for me to go and watch a 3-hour French movie when I've already watched a few episodes of the show. But I might check it out. I like I said, I've read the book, and it's a classic. So I might check it out. But two shows, Laid and The Dragon Prince. I did not watch The Dragon Prince, as I've already said. I got far behind on that show, never caught up. From what I'm gathering, season 7, the response is tepid. It's like not quite.
But this was your thing, was that the last few seasons have not been strong, right? So
well, for me, the 4th season was not strong. I'm seeing the 6th season people actually really liked, but then heading into season 7, it seems like the response is back down. So it's a little bit hot and cold, this show, it seems.
Okay.
And then I did check out Laid, which is the Peacock show starring Stephanie Sue. I almost read her character name. And
Stephanie Zhu is from Everything Ever All at Once, and she was in
yes,
the Fall Guy last year. Yeah.
This is the show about a woman who is discovering that every man she has, every person that she has slept with, is starting to die, just dying off one by one. And I saw the reception seemed to be fairly chilly for this show. That people did not seem to love it, so I almost didn't even check it out. But I watched the first episode and I actually thought it was pretty fun. I thought it was a fun first episode. 8 episodes total, and what I'm seeing is that like over time the ratings for the episodes go down, down, down. So that may be where the chilly reception is coming from. But I thought it was a fun pilot at the very least.
I've not watched this. We don't get Peacock in Canada, so I will have to wait for it either to get acquired by a Canadian television distributor, sometimes happens, or watch it in other ways. But I've not yet watched Laid season 1, but I had heard the same thing, that people were pretty high on the beginning, and maybe it doesn't have quite enough of an ability to hold its momentum as it continues on. So, but it's not dropping all at once. It's dropping weekly, right? I believe that's true.
Looks like it did drop all at once.
It did drop all at once. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I would say jury's still out on for me on that one in terms of whether it's worth checking out. I thought it was a fun first episode, but it was like a 7 out of 10 fun. It wasn't like blow my socks off kind of fun. So all right.
The other thing that I watched, just because I was looking to make sure I'd watch something at least new this week, was the new season of What If dropped on Disney Plus. So the first 2 episodes of the new season, I watched the first one. I have not watched any What If, and I was quite excited by this to like oh, I haven't really checked it out. I'm going to go watch it. The first episode I didn't love. It was just not something I thought worked for the story, and I felt a little lost in terms of knowing that this is a show where every episode is sort of an anthology in terms of it's a different multiverse thing that might happen. So in this one, there's
can we just like set the stage for what this is? Because like What If, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a show that takes comic stories and changes them a little bit. So it's like, for instance, the first episode is called What If Captain Carter Were the First Avenger? And it just explores the idea of like just random different thoughts for different comics, which to me feels way too in the weeds for my level of comic knowledge.
I believe it's specifically like things that happen in the MCU movies that then are like they just take a different spin on them in terms of an alternate timeline in the multiverse. So for example, like the first episode of the new season has a scene where it's the scene in, I believe, Captain America, one of the Captain Americas, where it's like Captain America and not Winter Soldier, new Captain America, where they're running side by side. But in this version, it's like it's the Hulk, it's Paul Rudd, like literally, and it's like the jogging scene. I don't know if you remember so it takes like these moments, and then like it's like, oh no, what if something different happened? And then this one, it's all about how like not Paul Rudd as the Hulk. That he would be Ant-Man. I mean Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk. It's Mark Ruffalo. And then this one, there's where like Mark Ruffalo tries to like reverse his gamma powers and then accidentally creates like many versions of giant Hulks that then they have, like the Avengers, who basically look like Transformers, have to try and fight him. That's basically what the first episode was. And like, it's a neat idea. Like I think I wanted it to work better, and I'm actually interested in going back to watch it from the beginning, because I imagine they use more of their good ideas at the beginning than they do into the third season. But I almost wanted more setup at the beginning. Like I felt like it sort of relied on the idea that I knew exactly where we were differing in the MCU movie than it did. And I was like, oh, I need a little more handholding. Jeffrey Wright plays like the Watcher, who's the narrator of the show. And I feel like they just could have used him far more effectively to be like, in 2012, but they don't do that. They're just like, here's a scene, but it's kind of different than the scene was in the movie. But you kind of remember the scene from the movie. And I'm like, I don't really remember the scene from the movie. So yeah.
Yeah, that was basically my concern. I didn't realize it was specifically movie focused, but even if it is, it's just like I'm not like diehard enough to know what the differences are. It's like it's a strange concept for a show, but apparently into its third season. So
yeah.
all right.
So that's what I watched this week.
I did want to catch up on a couple of things. I did finish Man on the Inside
Oh yeah.
finally.
Okay. Yes.
And I will say, when I started the season, I said, it was fine. And from what I was hearing, like it never like really hits much harder than what you get in the beginning. And I don't know if that's really true. I actually did really start to enjoy the show over the course of the season, and I actually thought the ending was like very impactful in terms of like how it got me to care about the characters. I really liked it. It is renewed for a season 2, as I said. And I already said recommended like to check it out, but like I just wanted to like come back to it and say I ended up really enjoying that season of television. Man on the Inside, I thought it was really good.
I think Netflix is going to hit out of the park this year in terms of their comedies. We talked about this, I think, last week as well. We were talking about the fact that A Man on the Inside got renewed. Nobody Wants Us is returning as well, and then No Good Deed has finished. Well, it dropped all at once. I feel like they've had a good little run of these comedies. So I really like Man on the Inside as well. I feel like there's a moment kind of halfway through that has this like emotional gravitas to it as well that was like really good. And one of these things where I think shows are sort of figuring out the right pacing for sort of a modern TV audience of not letting things drag on. I think like there's like the moment halfway through that I felt like could have been the season 1 finale moment, like they could have built to that, and instead it's literally the halfway mark of the show. So yeah, I liked Man on the Inside a lot. I'm excited for it to return, and as we said last week, it's scheduled to return next year, so shouldn't have to wait too long.
Yeah, there's I so the basic premise of the show, this is not spoiling anything. It happens in the first couple of minutes, is that Ted Danson is has lost his wife recently, and that's part of his character. And I watching the show was really struck by how present that was throughout the season and how they handled the impact of it. And I was especially drawn back to another Netflix show that I watched called Afterlife, which was a Ricky
Oh
Gervais
yeah.
show
Hmm.
about a man who lost his wife. And obviously there are different circumstances and people respond to grief in different ways. But like, and that show was all about the fact that his wife had died. But just like I was really drawn in by the way that they handled that, the emotion of it, the impacts of it, and the presence of it throughout his life as he went on about doing other things. So just I thought it was really well done. Good show, Man on the Inside.
Agreed.
Secret Level, the Amazon video game show. In the vein of
Hmm.
Love, Death, and Robots, I have watched almost all of them now. I just haven't finished the final episode. I will say I think it's not quite, doesn't quite hit as hard as Love, Death, and Robots. But I think if you liked Love, Death, and Robots, definitely just watch Secret Level. There are definitely some fun ones in there, some wild stuff. The Pac-Man episode is really strange, and the animation is great throughout. It's not quite as daring as Love, Death, and Robots again, in
Hmm.
terms of some of its episodes, but like there's some good stuff in there, and I think did that one also get renewed for season 2? We want to talk about that.
We didn't
I
talk
think
about it
that
if it did.
it is renewed for season 2 as well, Secret Level. So um,
Okay.
it's not the kind of show for everyone, but if you like these little snippets, short story animation things, check it out.
Okay.
Um, and then Grace, I
Yes.
watched 2 more episodes of Dexter: Original Sin.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I've been there sitting there waiting for me. And I feel like I saw that people are liking it, but I don't know whether the people that like it, I don't know. I don't
This
know.
is okay. This is perhaps the most surprised I've been by a response to a show, because I really watched that first episode and I was like, this is terrible. And I feel like the response is very different than that generally. The response has been either I really like it, or yeah, it's pretty bad. It seems to be very mixed. I've seen a lot of differing responses, but a huge contingent of people really seem to like the show. I talked about it on my stream the other day, and I was like, what do you guys think? I feel like I'm off on this one. Like, and a lot of people were saying like, no, I did really like it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to actively try to like turn my brain off of the this feels like an SNL sketch
Mm-hmm.
version of a show and try to watch it for what it is, which is, I think, just an excuse to have more Dexter.
It
Uh,
is. It is. That's
and
fine.
that's what I wanted, but it felt like they were just rehashing in that first episode. Um, so I actively tried, and I will say I did enjoy the following two episodes a lot more, like
Okay.
considerably, because I really hated the first one. But I think there's a couple factors. One is my own approach to it. I was able to turn my brain off of that function a little bit. I was able to sort of like try to enjoy it more, and I got there. But then I think more importantly, the show also moves away from the rehashing a little bit. The first episode is like a literal retelling of a thing we had already seen, and it's not telling us any new information whatsoever. Starting in episode 2, they start their own plot lines that are new to this show, that are like more long-term plot lines that are going in different directions, and it feels like I'm watching Dexter again. And that's kind of all I wanted. And it's still not quite like 100% there, but I do think if you're a big Dexter fan, and you similarly were turned off by the first episode, give the next two a shot because it might be able to draw you in. It's not like prime Dexter, but it's like like a season 6 of Dexter, something like that.
Yeah, so I wrote an article about for Parade about what happened at the beginning of the show, and I was being pretty cynical in my take of that. I felt like they were sort of like, beating a dead horse, but actually the opposite, bringing a dead horse back to life, to like keep this thing going. And what I feel like my complaint is actually much more of a complaint about the Dexter universe and the future of Dexter Resurrections more so than it even is Dexter Original Sin. I didn't find it as like I think cartoonish as you did. I did not think it was like the most amazing episode of television I've ever watched. But I'm more annoyed with the fact that it was like, oh, we're ruining the ending of a different show that doesn't even matter to this show that you're going to watch because it's a prequel show and he could just be dead until they do Dexter Resurrections. But they almost wanted to like set up Dexter Resurrections in this thing, which I thought was very annoying. I was looking for tweets to back me up on like, oh my God, how silly that they brought Dexter back. And it was very hard to find those, Taran. I found two that had no likes. They were so buried on Twitter. Whereas most of the reaction was like, this is amazing. I'm so excited. This show, I feel like the sentiment, the Rotten Tomato score, the critic score is 75%, audience score is 90%. That to me tracks where like the fandom is liking it more. It's not a bad show, but the like fans are loving it more than like I think that we're thinking it's a really good show. And even there's a Forbes article from yesterday that says Dexter Original Sin is surprisingly great. That's what they are. It's something like that. I can't remember the exact title. I wonder whether, Taran, this is the example of a show that every once in a while there is this show that is basically on streaming, although Showtime, I guess, technically is not like like they put the episodes up on Friday and then air it on Showtime on Sundays. That is actually like less a streaming show and more what you would think about of like actually a pretty good like network show, where there is something a little bit about this that to me does not feel prestige, but I see why it's popular. And I guess like a good example of these are basically a bunch of the Taylor Sheridan shows where those are like basically streaming shows, although not
Mm.
totally, but they have a massive fan base of people who are like, and I don't think that like, and I'm saying like Yellowstone and Dexter have the same fan base, but there's this thing about like sometimes we talk about our favorite shows and we're like, this show is incredible. And then if you actually look at the ratings, like we're talking about like millions of people watch it rather than like tens of millions of people watch it,
Mm.
And sometimes there's just a show like this that like, and people have such fondness. I have such fondness for that first run of those first few seasons of Dexter that like it's not totally unsurprising to me that like people just want the most like back to basics Dexter and are enjoying it no matter what. And that this is like not bad enough, I honestly think, to be like, that's a really bad show and you are all bad for what like it's like that's a fine show that I'm happy people are liking.
I think what's interesting in what you're saying is that like, and part of what got me back around was trying to remember too that like the original Dexter, while great,
Yeah.
especially for its time,
Yeah.
was pretty silly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like a
It is.
very
It is.
silly show. And
Yeah.
like coming back to that realization and trying to accept the silliness of this show, I kind of was like, okay, you know what? This does actually feel like Dexter felt. And I feel like I'm being transported back to 2006 in the world where like this was the style of show. And at the time, Dexter was a premiere like
Yeah.
show. It
Yeah.
was Showtime. It was like a higher quality than like a network television kind of show. But in the last 20 almost 20 years, that has changed, and this feels a lot more network than it does premium streaming. Even though it does have the level of like I mean, granted, I don't even think I've seen any sort of like I guess there's swearing that wouldn't be in network television, but like it's almost like the Overton window has passed it, and now it feels more conventional than anything else. But that's kind of fine because that's what it always used to be. And Dexter New Blood was trying to be darker and more premium streaming to me, and it kind of worked at first, but then kind of fumbled. So I know I think it's interesting, and what I will say is I'm like excited to watch the next episode when it comes out. Like I'm happy to be back in the world of Dexter. Especially I think in a weird way, I'm not as stressed about like how they're gonna mess up the ending because we already know the ending to this one. So now I'm just getting to enjoy. I think what I wanted last week, which is just show me Dexter just existing and killing people occasionally and getting into drama. Like that's all I want, and I feel like that actually is what they are trying to give me. It's just that first episode really threw me for a loop. So I think I might have been wrong about this one.
Yeah, I think that's fair that we were basic. I still think the like cash grab nature you can feel it so hard of like just kidding, he's actually back to life, and he's only back to life because we killed him in the winter. And if it was, that's also the other thing that I kind of hate, the like just tell me you wanted to bring him back. Don't be like, well, actually he died in the winter so he could come back to life, and you're like, you
I
didn't
don't.
plan.
I don't really care about that. Like whatever.
Yeah,
Like
no,
just
that's my
yada yada. Just timey wimey. Just like whatever you need to do. If he wants to come back, if Michael C. Hall wants to come back, then let him come back.
yeah. All right, well that's
Um,
Dexter.
that's
Why did they drop
Dexter.
2 episodes in week 2? That's my only, why'd they do that? Doesn't make any sense. Why'd they do that?
It was very strange, but I was fine with
Because
it
it's
because
because it's 1 for the rest of the series. It's 1 episode per week. It doesn't make any sense.
they were just like, we know the first episode was weird, or at least maybe some of you might have thought it was weird. All right, coming up,
Mhm.
Squid Game.
Squid Game. Very excited for Squid Game. Season
Very
2
excited.
dropping all on, I guess I keep saying this when people are confused, but the 26th is officially, in some parts of the world, Boxing Day. It's where you
Mhm.
box up all your stuff. Good sales, as well. Good day for sales. I'm excited to just sit and watch Squid Game. I actually can't watch it
I,
that day because that's when I'm doing my family Christmas dinner, but I'll watch it the next day.
I will say, I was like, oh, I'm so excited. Squid Game is going to start. And then I looked and I was like, oh, right. It's going to drop all of the
All of it.
episodes.
Yeah.
And that actually really bummed me out. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that sucks. Like, I don't want to have to watch it all at once because I'm like, Squid Game was fun, but it happened like, 3 years ago and it was over for me in a matter of days. And now, after 3 years of waiting, it's again going to be over for me in a matter of days. And
Yeah.
I just would prefer to watch it, which is wild because, again, back to my Dexter days, I binged Dexter. I was a binger. Like, to the frustration of my friends, I would be like, Breaking Bad. Sorry, guys, can't talk about it. I have to wait for the season to end so I
Yeah.
can binge it. But
Yeah.
now that, like, I don't know, things have shifted. There's too many shows to binge. And I'm kind of craving like the high quality ones where you get to spend a little more time with it. And I'm kind of disappointed that Squid Game is just going to be here and gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough. Netflix has done the split, but I do think this is one that it'll be interesting to see how it goes over in a binge. The other thing that's interesting about Squid Game, I think, in terms of it'll be interesting to see what the reception to it is, not just from like whether it's good or not, that's fine. But season one was such this thing that everybody felt like they were finding, because I
Yeah.
think that there was a little bit of like, oh, you should check out Squid Game. And you'd be like, okay, I guess, like, and a little bit of, I think a lot of people like this premise of the show. I mean, we're so, I think, accustomed to, Taran, sort of like defending reality TV show to a degree, even when it's like bad reality TV. We're like, no, but there's still something to it. It's still so fascinating to watch, And this definitely has a little bit of like reality TV meets, sort of Hunger Games esque vibes. And so I think there was a little bit of like, could it really be like that good? And then I feel like everybody was like, oh no, that was really good and really incredible. But nobody, it had a moment, but it had this sort of extended, prolonged moment because
Mhm.
different people would eventually like sort of be like, okay, I guess I'll watch it. I
If
feel
we
like
were
over like,
around back then, people
I
listening to our
know,
podcast would have been on
I
it
know.
quick,
We would have been
but
on it so quick. But so it'll be interesting this year where I feel like I feel like the window of it will be so
it,
much smaller than season one.
Squid Game is a very, very different thing in 2024 than it was in 2021. Um, like in the last 3 years, culturally, it has had such an impact. There has been an actual reality show
Yeah.
called Squid Game: The Challenge. The Beast Games just
Yeah. It's
started, which are
basically
in
Squid
the
Game.
vein, very
Yeah.
clearly inspired by Squid Game. Mr. Beast was
Did
always
it.
very popular, but one of his most
Yeah.
popular videos, one of the things that really skyrocketed him to the top of YouTube, was his Squid Games YouTube
Yeah.
video. And
Yeah.
now there is a real life version of, like, not real life version, but like there
Yeah.
are imitations of this, and the culture has shifted in a very dramatic way against those things as well. So like I think my guess is that there is going to be an inherent cultural bias against Squid Game season two,
Interesting.
because people will want this, will be ready to pull the trigger on this if they see any mistakes, if they see anything that is like not good about it. They are, I think, going to be primed to turn against it. And I don't think Squid Game was a perfect show to begin with. I think it was a flawed show, but the strengths were so strong. So I think that there's a lot of potential for this to crash and burn in terms of reception, but I don't know if it will deserve it. I think it's just a matter of like how people are expecting expectations going in. If it manages to meet expectations or even exceed them, then that will be an incredible feat, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I guess every show has this risk of like when you come back and whether or not you can live up to the expectations, especially something like Squid Game, where I was pretty relieved to see that, like, if you have watched the trailer, gonna do Squid Game again. Just a
Yeah,
little spoiler for Squid
very
Game. They're not like
necessary. Very
they're not
necessary.
they're not Westworlding it and be like, actually, we're outside the park now. It's fun. It's very much like Hunger Games Part Two, which I think is a good move. I think that that's smart. I don't know how often you can continue to do that, but that's what this. We'll see if the season can like
Listen, if reality
navigate.
television tells you anything, it's that
Yeah,
you can just
that's
keep
true.
doing it for
That
20 plus years.
That's very true, Taryn. But I almost wonder whether like what you're saying to a degree, obviously, like the thing that they're missing out on by like not being like, hey, we're suddenly going to do a weekly release or even like batches. They did it with Arcane. They've done it with a bunch of shows. Stranger Things dropped like in 2 batches, and I think they could do it more. Bridgerton dropped in 2 batches. They could do this. They're choosing not to. I wonder whether that tells us anything about season 2, but I also wonder whether they're hedging a little bit against the sort of reaction that you're thinking for. Because I think that if you release this weekly and every week everyone's like, I feel that sometimes when we talk about a show weekly that we're not loving, where I feel like I'm coming in and being like, oh, but the episode did the same thing I'm not liking about the whole season. So every week I'm like, I feel like I'm like belaboring the point of something that's not good. And I wonder if like, not that I don't think the show is good, but I think to your point of like the show wasn't perfect. I think there are people who are misremembering that Squid Game was perfect. And then if you come back for season 2 and it's not perfect, then it's going to feel like it's bad, even when it's good. So I wonder if dropping it as a binge, dropping it over the holidays, people are going to watch it pretty quickly, but also there's the world where like people are busy over the holidays and actually won't get it to a little bit later. I wonder whether that actually does offset some of the like stuff that they might see in the show. It's also just they're so stuck to like we got to drop all of this at once. Sometimes they can't help it. But I wonder if this was intentional on their part of like we're gonna drop this whole thing at once at a time of year where like the discourse might be a little more muted in terms of if it's not like an absolute all-time incredible season of television. But
I mean, personally, I think this is how they did it last time and it worked. And so they're just like, we're not going to mess with the formula. We're just going to do it the same. I think that's how Netflix tends to work. I think that they're just like, well, our data says that binging is good because people like binging, because that's how their shows work. They're all binges. So it's like they're very scared to deviate from what's working, and they're doing very well. Netflix. So
it was at one point the most watched series of all time. So
mhm.
doesn't hurt for them to drop all of season 2 at once and have people watch it.
Well, I'm excited. We'll see how it goes. I'm going in with muted expectations personally, in the sense that I expect it to be slightly worse than season 1. And if it is, I'm going to be pleased with that because I enjoyed watching season 1 and I think that watching another Squid Game will be fun. If it's better, and I have a little bit of hope that it might be, then that will be very exciting. And I'm very curious to see what the response will be if it will manage to meet expectations. It was nominated for a Golden Globe prior to its release. So, expectations are certainly high. Grace, I'm also, I've got plans. I've got Christmas plans.
Oh, yes. Tell me.
I'm going to go see Nosferatu.
I'm very excited for Nosferatu. I'm very excited for Nosferatu. There's 2 movies I'm very excited about that come out on Christmas Day, and it's Nosferatu and A Complete Unknown. Nosferatu does seem to have more of the like. I don't think I've heard anyone be like it's bad. I think everyone's like excited. I think there's a little bit of like a caveat in terms of like you have to like horror, but if you've seen a Robert Eggers movie, sounds like people like this one as well. So I'm very excited for Nosferatu. I'm excited that you're going on Christmas Day. I'm trying to see if I could potentially go on Christmas Day, but
yeah, I mean, I always see a movie on Christmas. That is my tradition. And when I saw Nosferatu was releasing on Christmas, I was like, perfect. It's a perfect release. And so excited about that. I will my biggest Christmas blunder, Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, yeah, that's the last one. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
that one.
yeah. That's okay. That's not your fault. That's not your fault.
Listen, it was not my fault, but it was definitely the worst movie I've seen on Christmas, and it was like, oof.
Yeah.
It was also like I was trying a new theater with that one. I think if I'm remembering correctly, I was in Boston, and I think they opened an Alamo in there, and I was like, oh, that's a theater chain that I haven't been able to try before. I'm super, and then it wasn't good.
Right. I believe there's another movie. Just to wrap like on Nosferatu. I think this should be incredible.
Robert Eggers, of course, who did The Lighthouse and the Witch and The Northman. He really likes.
I like The
but
Northman.
he departed from the theme by going Nosferatu.
Yeah, it's Skarsgård, Willem Dafoe, Lily Rose Depp, Nicholas Hoult,
Nosferatu, of course.
Yeah.
Vampire movie. Yeah. Classic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is a direct remake or if it's just. I assume it's more his own take on the story, the myth.
No, it is a remake, which is an unauthorized adaptation of Dracula. So yeah, they like couldn't get the rights to Dracula when they tried to make this silent movie, and they made Nosferatu, and now he's remaking Nosferatu. So yeah, I'm very excited for this, and I'm trying to see it as soon as I possibly can. Whether I can see it on Christmas or not, TBD. I'm excited for Complete Unknown. I feel like this is a movie that some people are finding boring. Everything I've heard is just that Timothy Chalamet is quite good in this movie. He invested a
This is
lot of
the
time
Bob Dylan biopic-ish thing.
about his turn to the electric guitar, basically. I'm very excited for this movie. Maybe have my expectations up a little too high. I need to tweak them because I don't think anybody's being like, oh my god, best picture winner. Everyone's kind of being like, it's good, and Timmy's really good. To like some people who are like, no, it's quite boring. So we shall see. But it's by the same person who did Walk the Line, I believe. So I liked that, which is the Johnny Cash biopic. I liked that. So I think I will like this movie. It also comes out on Christmas. And then there's one movie, Taryn. Have you you've had your eyes on Baby Girl at all? I believe Baby Girl is dropping on or around Christmas as well. This
This
is
is
the
the one we've
Nicole
talked about
Kidman.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, Nicole Kidman, Harris Dickinson movie. I believe we talked about it maybe coming out of TIFF. I saw it at TIFF. I do not
I think
like
we
this
talked about it
movie.
recently, no?
Did we? Did it already
Yeah,
come
and then
out?
I,
Am
I
I
compared it
just
to the listeners.
Oh, yeah, that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I do not like this movie, and I don't know, I don't get why it's getting all the attention it is. My friend Matt, who is gay, said, straight people are gonna think this movie is crazy, which I think is very fitting. So, I mean, if you like this movie, I'm not judging you, but, I just really don't like it. So, we'll see how, what the culture has to say about Baby Girl,
I
Taryn.
mean, so far, just like taking a gander at some of the ratings, 6.0 on IMDb right now.
Yeah. Nicole Kidman
So
plays a female, like a CEO who then like gets in a relationship with a younger man who's the intern at the thing, but like the power dynamics like within the relationship are like the same as like a typical like he takes on a very like masculine dominant role. Yeah, so like she's his baby girl. Yeah, I don't love this movie, but you know, do with it what you will, baby.
all right, Grace. Anything else?
No, that's basically it over the holidays. Just watching a lot of holiday movies. Do you have any go-to holiday movies, Taryn? Do you no?
Not really. I just go see a movie on Christmas, the new movie. So my holiday movie this year is going to be Nosferatu.
Okay, very fun. My Christmas movies, my rundown is typically like Home Alone 1, Home Alone 2, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and Elf. Those are my faves. So probably try to watch them in the next couple
All
of
right.
days to get in the holiday spirit. But yeah. We did the top 10 movies of the year, Taryn. We did top 10 movies and television shows of the year. Did that with Josh Wigler. So that pod is out. And pretty soon, probably you and I will do our official rankings of top 10 TVs. Because I was mad. My favorite television show didn't make the list.
All right. Well, that's maybe a
No,
teaser for
yeah.
the coming weeks. We'll plan for a tastemaker episode. We will talk through our own lists, maybe compare and contrast with the list from that podcast. And maybe that would be roughly 2 weeks from now or something.
Yeah, we'll do
Um,
Nosferatu and Complete Unknown and Squid
or
Game next
maybe
week.
maybe
There's a
we do it
lot.
next week. It'll be the first, right? Or no, it'll be the 31st.
No.
So yeah, maybe
There's a lot
we'll go
more.
1 week into January and we'll do that. And the next week we've got Nosferatu and Squid Game to talk about. So
Yeah, there's a lot we could talk through next week. So
mhm.
yeah. All right. We'll see.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Make sure you're subscribed to the We Know Scripted TV feed and come check us out on YouTube as well if you want to watch us. And in the meantime, check out all the other stuff we got going on in the various places. Grace, anything else to plug?
Nope, that's it. Oh, we did a Wicked 1 month later pod. So it was Mike Bloom, Shannon, Gus, and Mari Forth, and myself. We all chatted about Wicked 1 month after its release. So check that out in the podcast feed as well.
All right. And stay tuned for our Dune coverage for the finale. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see all of you next time.